The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today on the Solar Podcast, Waste to Energy. My guest today is David Smart. He is the Senior Vice President at a company called Biostar Renewables. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Tim, for having me. It's great to be here.
Really looking forward to learning more about your story and what you guys are up to at Biostar. It's a new day in America. We are sitting here in early September on the tail end of a brutal report from the IPCC, right, about the situation that humanity is in with climate change. And of course, renewable energy is one of the major solutions to that problem, so to speak. And so I'm excited to learn about waste energy and the impact that waste energy can have on a customer's footprint. Before we go into that, though, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to Biostar.
Absolutely. Biostar is actually a family business for me. So I work with some of my family in the business, but I studied at Indiana University, did a short stint in Washington, D.C., and decided that I wanted to be a capitalist for now, not a bureaucrat. But with that said, I had a real interest on the renewable energy industry, and some of my experience in DC kind of helped me hone in on that. And at the same time, Bill Love, who's our CEO, was looking into some waste to energy technology, but really the focus at that time was creating this organic fertilizer. And so going and taking waste streams and be able to capture the nutrients in those waste streams and create a fertilizer. So I actually moved back to Kansas City and started working for the company developing energy services projects back in 2013, 2014, doing a lot of lighting and HVAC retrofits, building retrofits. And eventually we started focusing on the solar business a little bit more. Bill actually had at the time an EPC contracting business out of Denver, which is a company called E-Light Electric. And they are a fantastic EPC contractor and have developed or not developed, but have actually built and EPC'd, I think now over 2.5 gigawatts of solar around the country. And so that, sort of shifted the focus a little bit with respect to the electricity side of our business to solar. And we had some successful transactions buying projects from early stage developers or buying and selling portfolios and looking at value add opportunities. And so we sort of touched on the solar business, but in the background, we've really been always developing and refining our organic fertilizer process, which has led us on a journey to figure out how to clean up water. It's led us on a journey to really understanding digestate and all the benefits and pitfalls of farmers having to land apply manure. And then all of a sudden this renewable natural gas business or market rather is sort of born. And we joke here that, Bill and his partner, John Martin, who sits just behind me, they've been in the renewable gas business long enough that they actually used to flare the biogas because it really didn't have any value. And so obviously today that's a different story. So we've really touched a lot of different places, but really starting to hone in on this waste to energy opportunity, creating biogas, from various feedstocks, but sources of waste, mostly animal manure, sometimes food waste. And so we think there's a really big opportunity there and a really amazing inflection point where we really have a landfill capacity issue in this country. And then, of course, we have a renewable energy need in this country. And those seem to be kind of intersecting right now in this renewable gas market. It's a really exciting time.
Very good. When I think about, let's just talk a little bit about manure to start, and then we can talk about other feedstocks. But, it's a it's a dirty business and it's a cost center to the farmer. It has potential impacts on the environment. And if you can do something good with it that reduces its impact on the land and can generate electricity for you, that's a win-win. So give us a overview of the economics of waste to energy for a farmer.
Sure. Well, a lot of the issues, have been in the cost of that dirty water and cleaning up that dirty water and what to do with that water. And so that makes our value proposition particularly interesting because we create a really basically the exact same components as urea, which is the best fertilizer that you can use as a farmer, but you can't use that as an organic farmer. It's not an organic product. And so, so our fertilizer process being able to bolt onto these digester facilities, which is where, of course, they put all the manure in, they create the biogas in the digesters, but there's still a lot of effluent waste. There's still a lot of waste that comes off the back end of that digester. Farmers for a long time have taken that waste and land applied it. And there are some benefits to that, but there's also, as you mentioned, some issues to that, and with nutrient runoff and where does that all go? And actually, you end up with a really large amount of digestate, and so it's really a lot to land apply, and a lot of times you have too much of it, and it's of course expensive to haul away, and so there's a lot of issues that our process is able to solve. So right now, our focus is we're actually building our fertilizer, partnering with renewable gas developers who already have maybe a digester on a farm, or we also do food waste digesters. Our largest facility that we own to date is actually a food waste digester in San Bernardino, California. California has a food waste or a landfill diversion ban, and so any organic waste starting in the next year that's sent to landfills, there are actually monetary fines for doing that. And so that's of course helping driving the market out there. And so we bring in food waste from various food waste or waste hauling companies and actually digest that. And there we create electricity. There's actually a kind of interesting tariff program there that allowed us to sign a long-term PPA with the utility, which of course makes the project that much easier to finance. But the value of this gas actually most of the time and on projects going forward, that gas will be sold into what's called the Lcfs market, the low carbon fuel standard market in California. And that places a really, really high value on the gas. So our San Bernardino project is a little bit unique. We take the gas there and power two 1.3 megawatt engines, and we create baseload renewable electricity. And so even though it's only 2.6 megawatts, it's not a huge project with respect to kilowatt hours put on the grid, but the utility really likes it because it's a baseload power, baseload renewable source, and that of course helps with stability on the grid.
So you're effectively building a power plant that runs on food waste. It's a grid tied standalone facility, though. It's not feeding anything behind the meter, so to speak, right?
Right. Yeah. And then we actually from there, there's of course a gas cleaning system. It goes through the engines, creates electricity, but that back end waste that we talked about, we create our organic fertilizer there on site. So we take, I believe I will have to double check me on the website, but I believe it's for every 100,000 gallons of dirty water that comes in, we return $78,000 of 78,000 gallons, of clean water that's clean enough for industrial reuse. And so that's a really big deal because when you're in the middle of San Bernardino, hauling a bunch of dirty water out of your facility, of course, gets really expensive.
So it sounds to me like you're describing an IPP business. Is that the business model? You're an independent power producer?
Sort of. We're sort of. I don't think that's how we designate ourselves. We're really more, of a developer. We have a partnership on the gas side to go and market that gas and sell that gas into the market. And so, yeah, not quite. But yeah, we do have, a couple, especially also in the solar business, a couple of long-term PPAs with utilities in California.
But you're owning you're owning these assets for the long term, or
Yep.
not?
Yep.
Yeah. And so if I'm a farmer though, and I'm looking for, a solution, so to speak, a waste to energy solution, and I call Biostar, are you then also approaching most of your opportunities in that regard, doing some form of a PPA with the farmers, or does it vary?
Typically, the gas that we would create is going to be sold actually into the California low carbon fuel standard market. So California passed what's called the Lcfs market, and the goal is to reduce their consumption of their transportation fleet. I believe it's by 50%. It's a big goal. And so that gas is technically being sold into the California marketplace and then bought by companies for the most part that have fleet vehicles, natural gas fleet vehicles. So FedEx and UPS, you see a lot of their trucks out there and they say powered by natural gas, or buses. Bus systems might be buying that gas. So, and then what's really interesting there is that gas is valued on its carbon intensity. So based on where you're creating the gas in the country, they look at the carbon intensity that it took to make that. And so what we find is in, say, rural Missouri, for example, it's a lot more carbon intensive to make that gas than it is, say, in California. And so we actually support those projects. We would come and develop the renewable gas digester, and then we would look for opportunities to enhance that digester with our clean water and effluent treatment, organic fertilizer technology on the back end. We've also found that solar and renewable energy, increases the CI score, or rather decreases the CI score, which is a good thing in the carbon intensity world of that gas. So it improves the value of the gas, and we can enhance our plants with solar PV. And then of course we make clean water as well. So the goal is to have, as close to a zero waste solution as possible, and be able to use, we're able to use close to 98% of the product that goes in, comes out in some sort of reusable product.
And is there some kind of a rule of thumb in terms of the amount of electricity that these digesters use, which allows you to think about, okay, how many, if we're going to install a digester of this scale, then we need so much solar to offset that footprint, so to speak?
Yeah, gosh, the rule of thumb right now, we're building a lot of these projects are falling kind of in the 2 to 10 megawatt range. We have a couple that we're working on at renewable diesel facilities that are a little bit larger, more like 15 to 20 megawatts. But the LCFS program allows you to, where we get hung up on making the projects bigger is typically, with local utilities and net metering requirements or constraints. But according to the California Air Resources Board, CARB, who makes the rules for this LCFS program, as long as you create that power behind the meter, you can net meter back to the grid. So it allows you to upsize your system tremendously. And, whether you use it behind the meter or net meter it back onto the grid, it doesn't matter, but you can size the solar to 100% of your annual load. So we're finding that these projects mostly are falling in the kind of 5 to 10 megawatt range. Then we upsize them a little bit. If we're adding our organic fertilizer technology on there, we'll typically upsize them, maybe 10 or 15% to accommodate that process as well.
Now, this LCFS market, is that something that's going to come to other parts of the United States, do you think?
Yeah, great question. We do. I think Nevada has legislation passed and they're working on it. There are several states that are working on that type of legislation. So really similar to the solar SREC markets, there's several pretty strong state renewable energy credit markets out there where we can generate credits, by selling solar. Very similar type programs, except on the gas side of things. And again, the baseload nature of these projects, the 24/7, you could always be pumping waste into these digesters and they operate 24/7. So being able to create more baseload power really helps, attack that need for renewable, energy and the issues that we have and face with respect to climate change, as you mentioned at the top of the call.
Yeah, I mean, what's present for me is that with commercial industrial solar, that's the business I'm in. One of the barriers to entry is the capital expense of the project on the front end, right? And this is why we need incentives. All sources of energy in the United States are incentivized, whether we know it or not, right?
Sure,
Fossil fuels have receive tremendous incentives from the federal government.
sure.
And so, here in Illinois, we have a solar market that is fueled by solar renewable energy credits. As you mentioned, we call them SRECs. Without them, the payback period might be 15 years. With them, the payback period is more like 6 to 8 now.
Yep.
And that gets people's attention. But I'm curious, because your projects are sizable solar projects potentially, but then also you're tacking on another huge piece of equipment that has a capital expense. How does that get financed?
Yeah. So, right now on the gas projects, as I mentioned, our project in California has a long-term PPA with SCE. And so that really helped. We were also able to achieve a grant on that project because it was a regional food waste project. But on the gas side, we're absolutely using, the LCFS market and, market data to finance these projects. That's a huge, huge part of it is the value of the gas and being able to sell into this market. They've passed some legislation. I'm not a legislative expert on LCFS on this topic, but they've passed some legislation to ensure, that program is long-term and is here to stay and that it's not going to all of a sudden go away in 6 years and a bunch of developers are going to be stuck. But I think what will happen is that as other markets open, right now, no matter where you're building one of these projects in the country, you really have your sight set on California. And this will absolutely open up more opportunities. It'll open up smaller opportunities. There's a lot of money coming into the space. And of course, all that big institutional capital is chasing the really big, to scale, big 50, 80, $100 million projects. But there's a lot of smaller farms, that or smaller conglomerates of farms that can band together to make projects like this feasible that, some of that earlier institutional capital isn't going to be as interested in. So local incentive markets like that will absolutely help pave the way, particularly for those smaller to medium-sized projects.
And what is the payback period here in the Midwest for these digester projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to tell you a payback. I would think it's probably between, if you just looked at it on a cash basis, that's probably inside of a 10-year payback. We look at it more. We have several investors involved, and so we look at rates of return and things like that. And these projects, when we can then bolt our fertilizer process on and make money that way and create that value stream, when we can add solar in, we make really nice returns on these projects. But they're also right now our goal is to build 2 of these plants a year. They're big projects, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and so that's definitely a good problem to have. But a problem that we have going forward is being able to scale the business and build more than 2 of these projects a year. And right now it's sort of the Wild West. There's just a lot of people entering this market at the same time, and so being able to reach out to the farmers and make good connections with the farmers is hugely important. We have a organic fertilizer expert on our team named Alan Philo, and I have a podcast as well called Renewables. And I have to plug myself. Tim's going to be on the podcast, so really looking forward to talking more about the Illinois solar market there. But go and check out our episodes with Alan Philo. He is really an expert on our organic fertilizer product. He's an agronomist, really smart guy. But having him help sort of as a conduit to these farmers, because there's a lot of slick developers out there right now who are calling up every farmer in a particular region, and I think there's a lot of kind of angst around who to partner with and how to go to market, and make sure that the farmers are taken care of in that process.
It makes me wonder, what you mentioned that it's the Wild West, and that's certainly the situation with the solar industry. Even though solar technology is 70 years old now, the
Sure.
industry only took off in 2010, really, in the United States. So here we
Right.
are 11 years in, and now it's catching fire, and it's going gangbusters. And so lots and lots of capital is flowing in. There's lots of new companies, new
Yep.
developers, new investors.
I'm here in Kansas City. It seems like we have a new company every month, mostly residential stuff, but yeah.
And so but this waste to energy industry, give us some perspective on how mature is that industry, and what are the trends that you're paying attention to?
Yeah, I think they were saying they need a 300% increase in California and these types of facilities to be able to meet the goals of their landfill diversion program that they've implemented, and it's been going on for 5-6 years, but it's really coming in the next year and a half. They're actually going to start enforcing it. But with that said, so there's a huge need for projects like these, and there's a lot of projects being developed. Excuse me, but this technology, like solar, has been around for a really long time. In Germany, they are kind of masters of anaerobic digestion, and I believe a lot of that is because gas costs were much higher in Europe than we've typically had to pay in the United States, and so they've gone and developed these alternative solutions. But it's relatively new in the United States, and there's a huge need. A lot of it, again, kind of comes back to the need to be able to divert waste from landfills. We have some great information on our website about this, but we used to be able to sell a lot of our waste to China and other countries, and we were sending hundreds of container ships a day to China full of waste. They would send products over, and we would send trash back. And during the sort of tariff wars of a few years ago, they said, "Hey, we're not taking any more of this waste." A lot of it was cardboard recycling as well, but they stopped that cold, and that meant that there were really only kind of, I think it's around 15 years is what Cal Recycle estimates of landfill capacity left in the country. And landfills, as you probably know, are extremely hard to get permitted, kind of up there with nuclear sites. So people really don't want to see new landfills being permitted, yet we have a huge problem. And so we have to figure out how to get organic waste, because that's a pretty good chunk of it, diverted, and we have all this value stored in this manure and food waste that's being thrown into landfills that we can capture and turn into energy and other useful products in the agriculture space.
Yeah, you've really put your finger on a hot topic there, David, with this landfill space issue that we have. 15 years goes by fast. You know,
Yeah.
some of these projects probably take 5 years to develop easily.
Oh, sure. Sure.
And so we are kind of deer in the headlights now with regards to the waste stream and what we're going to do. You know, I'm a huge proponent of cradle to cradle manufacturing and zero waste. But to this day, we don't see a lot of requirements around that in the United States. Certainly, the Europeans are chasing that harder and requiring products to be taken back, for example, by
Hmm.
the original manufacturer and then repurposed, and then designing products from the get-go to
Right.
last much longer and be repaired and reused
Yep.
instead of just thrown away in a landfill. But well, what else
Yeah, it's
should our
amazing.
listeners know about your business and the business of waste to energy? It sounds like California, you know, is a great market, and I'm sure you're going to do gangbusters there. What other markets are you excited about?
Yeah, so there's actually, I'll have to use our site, which you can see in my background as a little cheat sheet, but there's several markets, that have passed landfill diversion bans. And we have a lot of information about that on our website. I think right now, here they are. It's California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Um, with California as the exception, the general kind of gist of those programs up in the Northeast are that mostly around food manufacturing businesses. If you are a business, I think a lot of them are written, that creates more than 1 ton per week or some amount, some tonnage per week, then you are going to be required to send that waste to a qualified recycling center. One of the issues, in that policy is that if there isn't a qualified recycling center within 20 or 30 miles, then you're exempt. And so there's absolutely a need for more of these types of facilities, and companies like ours are trying to go and strategically place, projects with relation to food waste. But with that said, the digester business is really hot in the dairy manure space right now because that has a better CI score, and this Lcfs market is really driving in that direction. But we really feel long term that this commercial and food waste, organic food waste, seeing these policies being developed is going to become a bigger and bigger part of the mix. So I think there's another maybe 9 or 10 states that have similar bills, working their way through the state legislature and are in various stages. But there's that's sort of the landfill diversion side. And then on the LCFS side, the similar to the SREX on the gas side, there's some states out west. I want to say Nevada and maybe Arizona are considering, policies like this. So there's sort of the Northeast, which is where we also do a lot of solar development because of the deregulated kind of nature of those electricity markets. But then also, a focus out west, of course, because of the California incentives and other LCFS opportunities that we see in the next several years.
Cool. Should we talk a little bit about some of the other businesses that you're in? You're also developing pure play solar projects,
Yeah.
and maybe you're getting into solar and storage. Are you getting into batteries?
A little bit. We definitely want to be getting into batteries. We right now we have a pretty nice kind of 30 to 40 megawatt commercial and industrial solar pipeline that we're working on. Of those, there's only a couple or a handful that are really good candidates for batteries, but we work with a really great battery consulting group, and we definitely look for those opportunities. There's also, potential. Right now, we're sort of refocusing. We really like these opportunities where we can use solar to enhance these RNG plants. And so that's been exciting. We have a 30 to 40 megawatt pipeline of RNG kind of CI score improvement solar projects. And that's been really great as well. The commercial and industrial side, I'm sure you can relate to this as well as anybody. It's gotten really, really competitive. Mostly looking for PPAs, and so we're working in that space. We have some different ways that we create leads in that space on a national basis through partnerships with energy brokerages for the most part. But it's an increasingly competitive space, and so we're really focused on a couple of key markets there, mostly New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We have definitely our eyes on Illinois, have a couple of projects in Illinois kind of in various stages, and look forward to having you on our show to talk more about that program out there, the block grant program. I know it's kind of clogged up, but would love to see that Illinois marketplace, open up more, because it's close to home, and there's a lot of good opportunities out there actually with food waste companies as well.
Yep. And so when it comes to solar and storage, what is a good opportunity for you?
Yeah, right now our RNG related projects are the best opportunities, but we're also looking at taking sort of this decarbonization mindset and decarbonizing the oil and gas industries. We're really starting to explore how can we serve midstream companies. We're seeing a lot of midstream gas companies making announcements about behind the meter renewables, and we think that's really exciting. And then we're working with sort of legacy customers or partners who are in the food processing business to go and address sustainability at their portfolios. We just found, frankly, that a lot of those customers of ours, are in states that just don't quite have, they're not solar friendly. There's net metering constraints, and there's certainly not any incentives that allow for those solar projects to be really, really exciting. So when we can bolt them onto an RNG project, that's really exciting. But a lot of our customers, sort of in the Missouri, Iowa, Oklahoma region, we just haven't been able to make those projects pencil yet. So I think going forward, there's a lot of opportunity there. But right now, the C&I solar focus is mostly, frankly, out in New Jersey, a little bit in California, a little bit in Texas for sort of our legacy, commercial type customers.
Very good. I need to make a couple of announcements, and
Sure.
then we will wrap up the conversation with David. We are supporting the Illinois Solar Energy Association and promoting their Tesla raffle. If you want to win a Tesla Model X, which is a pure EV luxury SUV, go to illinoissolar.org and click on the Win a Tesla link. And tickets are only $100. You can buy 4 tickets for $300. And we've been doing this for, I think, 9 years. So it's a great way to support solar in the Midwest. ICEA is our de facto professional organization for solar installers, developers, financiers, and anybody involved in the renewable energy space here in Illinois. I also want to encourage our listeners, if you appreciate this content, please go to cesenergy.com/podcast and click the subscribe button. That is the YouTube channel subscription. And we're bringing you topics like Solar App with Anson Moran, which is one-click permitting for residential solar. Topics like wildlife and solar, how to make solar farms more wildlife friendly with RPCS and Bree Bruce. We're also bringing you developers like Nick Blitterswyk from UGE Solar, talking about how community solar works and what are the hot markets. Some of the markets that David mentioned today are those markets: Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, Maine, etc. So please check it out at cesenergy.com. Subscribe to the channel. Please make comments, give it a thumbs up, and reach out to me if you have ideas for guests or topics that you'd like to see us covering here on the Solar Podcast. We welcome those ideas. We love to hear from our listeners. So please reach out to me. You can also reach me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm TG Montague on Twitter. now back to the show. Well, David, is there anything else that we should tell our listeners about Biostar? And most importantly, how can our listeners reach you?
Yeah, thank you so much. And you're doing a great job with this podcast, and particularly enjoyed the wildlife and solar conversation. That's actually something we're looking at right now. We're looking at a couple of different companies, but they're calling it agrovoltaics. And you're seeing actually New Jersey just passed some legislation you might be familiar with. I will not remember the exact name, but it's a dual use solar legislation or bill that they've passed, and now they have to kind of figure out how they're going to implement it. But basically incentivizing dual use, ag or row crops and solar sort of combos in fields. And we're looking into some really interesting companies that have racking solutions that allow you to create fencing with solar panels, or keep the panels more vertical so that you have more space to plant crops in between the rows. So that's a really interesting space, and everyone should definitely go back and listen to Tim's episode. So anyhow, no, I think that does a good job of summing it up. If anybody wants to get in touch, my email is dsmart@biostarrenewables.com. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find on there. And if you follow me, I apologize if I spam your feed. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so that's a great way to get a hold of me. And then we have social accounts across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you scroll, wherever you click. And we also have a podcast called Renewables, sustainability podcast. So you can find us on Anchor, on YouTube. Just Google Renewables, David Smart, and those episodes are really easy to find as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, David, for this lovely conversation about waste to energy. And let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Have a great day, David.